Hey, so far it's just me, but I don't know if Gary's going to jump in at some point. I don't remember because last week we had talked about maybe he'll be here tonight, maybe he won't. I don't think Brandon is. Brandon's out of town. Aaron has some kind of dinner function to go to. He may jump in later. Chris has a barbecue that he's going to. He may also jump in later. So we'll have to see how it all plays out. But I don't care. I am still planning on doing desert island discs, even if it's all by my own self, but that'll be more opportunities for us to interact with each other. So have your desert island disc list ready. And the way that I'm going to do it is it's going to be a top 10 list. And I made up some rules. I am only going to use studio albums. I'm not going to cheat and go for greatest hits collection, even though I'd be very tempted to. There's lots of artists who, if I were able to pick greatest hits compilations, that would be very easy. For instance, the Beatles' Blue album would probably be one that I would choose. The Doors, the Best of the Doors, the two record set, which I think was released in the early 80s, that would be a no-brainer. So I'm only picking studio albums. And I try not to spend too much time with it. I really approached it as going to my record collection, like, okay, we got a time limit here. I'm not going to spend all day thinking about this. But if I were leaving for a trip and I knew I could only take 10 albums with me, which 10 albums would I choose? And so, yeah, that's kind of how I am approaching this little project. And this was actually a suggestion that was given to our group. I don't know if I remember if it was from Mike Scott the Spins last time or not. Is anybody out there, by the way? I'm seeing that there's 10 people in the chat, but I'm not seeing anybody comment. So I don't know if maybe it's just my phone that's screwed up or not. But basically, that is really the only criteria I use. I'm picking 10 albums, studio albums. I'm not picking more than one album by one artist, because very easily they could be half Beatle albums, half Rolling Stones or Pink Floyd albums. So I am just going to be choosing one album per. I'm not going more than one album by an artist, because 5 would be Beatles, and I know I'd have multiple Pink Floyds, and it would just kind of defeat the whole purpose of it. So that's what I am picking. Hey, Trevor, how's it going? So it's going to be you. It's going to be me. I don't know who else is going to drop in. Like I said, maybe Aaron, not holding my breath. Maybe Chris, also not holding my breath. I don't think Brandon is showing up. So I hope it's cool that it's just going to be me and you guys. But definitely have your desert island picks ready. And the way that I was going to do it, if we had more, maybe do like a 5 and 5 kind of thing. But since it's just me, I'll just do one by one. Maybe we'll talk about the record. We'll talk about records that you have that you would put on your list as well. And I thought too, do I want to spread it around different genres? Do I want to pick an album from each different genre? At one point, I had a jazz album. I had Dave Brubeck's Time Out album, but I just don't love it enough for it to jump over the 10 albums that I pick. And some are going to be a little obvious if you know me, if you know my picks. However, I will say kind of a surprise. I surprised myself with, obviously there's going to be a Beatles album, but the Beatles album that I picked, I kind of surprised myself. That was one that I didn't expect to pick. I had another album that I picked, and then I put it back on the shelf because I realized this album that I did pick is one that I really love, and I don't know that I could live without some of these songs. So, hey, Kyle. Hey, Collectify. Hey, Ray. How's it doing? Probably bring all Beatles. Now, I'm not saying you got to conform to my rules, the rules that I gave about, only one album per artist, or only studio albums. If you want to pick greatest hits, that's fine. If you want to pick more from one, if you want to pick 5 Beatles, hey, I am certainly not going to complain. You know me, I'm all about the Beatles. Curtis, what's up? Basil, how's it going? I promise not to swear, Basil. I promise to keep this a very clean and wholesome kind of episode. If I can just get the lighting right here. It's kind of mood lighting right now. I can never, for whatever reason, this room is so damn dark. Okay, Ray, what Beatle albums would you pick, just out of curiosity? If you're going to pick 5 Beatle albums, that would be an interesting exercise for me. Hey, Prime Analog, how's it going? I can tell you off the top, I know Sergeant, if I had to pick 5, Sergeant Pepper would be in there, the White Album, Abbey Road, those were all no-brainers. Not going to give away any more than that, because I'd love to hear what you have to say. So basically, that's what we're going to do. If you want to start sharing some of your Desert Island discs in a little bit here, I will start getting into my list. I wanted to let, just kind of starting out here, our discussion, I saw the Elvis movie. Yes, I did. And I know I had kind of gone on a bit of a rant last week about Elvis, the fact that really Elvis doesn't do a whole lot for me except for certain periods. I like him in the 50s. I like some of his later 60s work. I think his stuff in the 70s was abominable. But I really enjoyed the movie. I thought it was entertaining. I really, Revolver and Rubber, I can't even talk tonight. Revolver and Rubber Soul. Yeah, absolutely. As a matter of fact, I don't know if you saw, not to get off the Elvis track here, but just because I'm seeing the comment, Giles Martin did an interview with Variety this week, and he said that the next Beatles remixes that we can come to expect will probably be Rubber Soul and Revolver, which is interesting because I was wondering if they were going to turn back the time and start doing the 60th anniversary reissues, which would mean starting with Please Please Me in 2023, maybe with the Beatles as well, doing both of those. Maybe the following year doing A Hard Day's Night and possibly Beatles for Sale. I wasn't sure if we were going to have to wait till 2025 to get a Rubber Soul remix, but I'm very excited if they are in fact going to be doing the remixes of Rubber Soul and Revolver. And I don't think he said, are they doing them both together in tandem, or are we going to get Rubber Soul this year, maybe Revolver next year? I don't think there's even any timeline that he gave for that, but I'm just excited that they're still planning on going forward with more remixes. I don't think you'd be able to call them anniversary reissues if they're doing them early, but I certainly am up for another Beatles Super Deluxe box set. Yeah, Beatles for Sale is great. I first heard the songs on the Beatles 65 album. That was before I ever knew there was a Beatles for Sale album. I love No Reply, I'm a Loser, Babies in Black. I think are great. I love their cover of Rock and Roll Music, I'll Follow the Sun. I think, there's some great songs on Beatles for Sale, and people tend to rank it very low on their list, but you got 8 Days a Week on there, Words of Love, I Don't Want to Spoil the Party, I think is one of their best early 60s songs. So, yeah, Beatles for Sale always gets picked last, and I've never understood that. Like, if I were ranking Beatles albums, what would be at the bottom for me would definitely be, and I'm not counting Yellow Submarine because I don't think Yellow Submarine to me is almost like an EP. Number one, you've already got 2 songs on there that we've heard before, Yellow Submarine and All You Need Is Love were already released. So you've only got 4 tracks on there that were new. The instrumental stuff I could do without, so I don't count Yellow Submarine. But at the bottom of my list would be, and check this out, would be this album with the Beatles, and I am actually coordinated. And no, this is not one of my Desert Island discs. It just happened, the shirt that I wore and the pint that I'm drinking out of. But with the Beatles has always been one of my least favorite albums, not because I don't like it. There's no Beatles album that I don't like, but there's too many covers on there. I could do without Devil in Her Heart. People always say Mr. Moonlight is the worst Beatles song. I would put Devil in Her Heart right down there with Mr. Moonlight. I think Mr. Moonlight, at least you got a great John vocal, even if you don't care for the song. Devil in Her Heart, You got George, who was still, you know, kind of, I don't want to say struggling as a vocalist, but he certainly was not as strong vocally as John or Paul. Never cared for the song. I think it was done by a girl group to begin with. I don't know. I could be wrong. But anyway, that is always one of my least favorite. Roll Over Beethoven is okay. Just too many covers. You really got to hold on me. I'm not crazy about that cover. So that's why I always rank that near the bottom. Beatles for Sale would not be near the bottom. I didn't even know that it would be like in my bottom three, to be honest with you. What You're Doing is great. Every Little Thing. Yeah, absolutely. Forgot about Every Little Thing. That is a fantastic track. Yeah, John's vocals, Marcus John's vocals on Mr. Moonlight, just really, say what you will about the song. John put so much enthusiasm into even the opening, and I did a video about my favorite John vocals, and that actually was one of them, just because the enthusiasm for that song, and he loved it for whatever reason. I don't know what he ever saw in that song, and I think maybe if they didn't have the organ, that kind of cheesy organ instrumental in the middle, if it were a guitar, I know there's a BBC version, I think of it, where it is a guitar. Maybe it's the anthology. It might be the anthology alternate take, which again, why is there an alternate take of Mr. Moonlight on Anthology 1 instead of one of the other outtakes that we know exist from Beatles for Sale? But they didn't. I mean, there's so many like alternate takes of I'm a Loser that would have been better than Mr. Moonlight, but I could do a whole video on the curious choices that made the anthology collection. Album. Oh, here we go with Gary. How about that? Gary.
Hello.
Just before, you know, so you don't burp or anything like that. I went live because I couldn't remember if you were going to be joining us. And I say, I have no idea he's going to be. I just been carrying this live stream for 15 minutes. I've been talking about the Beatles because when I was going over my choices, like how I made up my Desert Island disc list, I said I'm only picking one album per artist. I'm not doing like 5 Beatles albums, but somebody else picked 5, and then I just started getting carried away because I don't know, somehow it was like Beatles for Sale is great. I'm like, yes, it is great. Why do people shit on that? And then I'm like, but I will tell you, it'll be bottom of my list because a lot of people would rank Beatles for Sale lower. I said, what the Beatles would be my least favorite Beatle albums. I don't count Yellow Submarine, just trying to bring you up to speed here so you can jump in and hopefully contribute a little bit before we get started on our Desert Island disc. So Gary, welcome. We got 23 people on the chat right now, Gary. Holy
Smokes, 23. Let me turn.
Now, I'm not going to say it was because of me and my personality. More of me and less of you guys is not necessarily a great thing. However, I don't know. But we got lots of cool people. Daddy Blog, good evening. Nice to see you. Dawson, Revolver box set. That would be a freaking dream come true. I was just talking also about Giles Martin announced this week that the next Beatle remixes, what I assume are going to be super deluxe packages, are going to be Rubber Soul and Revolver.
Yeah, those would be fantastic to do.
Yeah, I would be so pumped for a Revolver because, you know, the earlier stuff, like how are you going to remix Please Please Me and make it sound better than I guess it already does? It's not like they were using a lot of sophisticated studio trickery at that point. It was just basically them recording what their live show was at that point. Right. Same for with the Beatles, A Hard Day's Night, kind of the same thing, but like, okay, you know, getting into Beatles for Sale, I think Help would probably be like the starting point for quality remixes. I think anything before that, it's going to be marginal at best, like any improvement that Giles Martin is going to be able to bring to those records.
I think Revolver's a perfect one to do, you know, because that's when they were really starting to experiment a bit. And, you know, a sound quality, the record already sounds good. And so to give it that extra touch, I'd be very curious to see what that sounds like, or to hear what
Yeah.
that's say.
I was, Gary, I was showing how I coordinated. Look how well I matched
Wow.
it. And Chris, aka Tuscadero, said matching boxers too. Well, you'll
Have you
just
shown that yet?
yes, won't you? Because I'm not gonna reveal that. White
Is
album
that
basil, yeah, that's great. No, Ray, it's fine. It doesn't take much to get me off topic. So yeah, no worries there. Marcus, I remember you saying, Jeff, that the White Album is your favorite Beatles album. Your statement at the beginning makes me think that you didn't pick that album as your Desert Island. Well, you might be right there. And I'll get into it when I show which Beatle album I picked. I'll get into the reasons why. It's not the White Album, spoiler alert, although that was the one that I actually had picked. It was on my top 10, and then it dropped off in favor of a different album, which surprised myself. Sometimes, hey, I see you, Ray. Thanks for dropping in. Daddy Black, standing room only. I know. I hope you guys all found chairs. I hope you all have something to drink.
yes?
So Gary, I was talking to get back to, and I even started to talk about how I'd seen the Elvis movie, which if anybody wants to know my opinions on the Elvis movie, I'd be happy to share. But getting back to the Desert Island Disc, I made some rules for myself in picking my 10 Desert Island Disc. And the first rule I already mentioned was I'm only picking one album per artist. The second one, I'm only picking studio albums. I'm not going to pick greatest hits. Because I was saying, I could pick the Blue Album by the Beatles. That would be like a no-brainer for me. Or the Best of the Doors, the 2-disc set that came out in the 80s. But apart from that, I didn't really limit myself otherwise.
I had a greatest hits album that was almost on my list, but then I don't know, for the sake, I normally don't pick greatest hits for these type of things that we do. And I almost had a live album, but I did not end up picking a live album. And I definitely did not pick more than one band, or more than one album per band. And the strange thing is actually a couple of my favorite bands are not even represented. So that's kind of odd, but I wanted a little bit of variety, I guess, if I was stuck on this island. Hopefully, there's a record player there too.
Yeah. Well, I was surprised too, because some of, my favorite bands I did leave off. But it was just the mentality that I went into is what records would I have a hard time being without for an extended period of time. Like I kind of, went into it sort of like, okay, if you had to leave on a long trip and you could only take 10 albums with you, they'd probably be CDs, obviously, because of, but nonetheless, albums, what 10 albums would I pick? And they didn't necessarily, these are not necessarily my favorite 10 albums, if I were to do like, top 10
Me
albums.
too. Right. Yeah. Yeah, I didn't do. Some of them are. If I made a list of top 10, a few of these, definitely would be on there. But that's not entirely, how this went. Because first off, if I made my top 10 albums of all time, there's no way that I couldn't have a few albums by the same band. Mm-hmm. That would be on that list. I was going to comment. Prime Analog Records said I look 20 years younger without the beard, and that's kind of what my wife thought too. So, I personally would prefer the beard, but I don't care if I look older with it. But
well, sometimes the wife gets what she wants, and
yes, that's right.
That's just the way it is. But I'm glad to hear that people like the clean shaven Barry. So yeah.
Is nobody else going to be on here? Is it just us?
I think it's just us. Like I don't know. Like I know Aaron and Chris said they might jump in, but I would be very surprised. I think Brandon's out of town.
Okay.
So it's just like you and me.
Wow. Well, we've done that before where it's just
Yeah. Yeah. So we can definitely roll with that one. I'm not feeling like this is going to suffer as a result, but I think it's going to allow for more input from people who want to comment and give their list.
Yeah, I agree. We can talk to people a little more now.
Yeah. Don't forget to smash the like button. Smash it with your fist. And give Gary and I a sub if you're watching this and you're not already subbed, which make much sense. I think most people are, but all right. Are you ready to get into your list? What I thought we would do is just go album by album, because since there's just two of us, I think we've got the time to be able to do that. And so mine are going to be in no particular order. I'm not ranking them from least to best. So I just got a stack here and we can just go one by one. So why don't you show your first one?
Okay, my first one, I've shown this in different settings. I went with the Ramones, Road to Ruin. One of the reasons that I picked this is, well, for one thing, I wanted something by the Ramones. I wanted a little bit of that punk without being too crazy about it. And I like this album because I think it's a complete album. I can listen to this one start to finish. I mean, I got some Ramones albums that I love, but there's still like songs that I skip. And I don't feel that way with this one. It's got a variety, you know. I mean, it's got the harder songs. It's got ballad type songs on here. It's got some bubblegum type songs. So I just really enjoy this thoroughly as a full album. And man, I tell you what, man, I went back and forth on some of these records, but I thought I can't go to wherever I'm going and not have something by the Ramones. So Ramones Road to Ruin is my first pick, Jeff.
Yeah, well, it's interesting to see the growth that the Ramones showed over the space of, because that was their fourth album, right?
Yes.
Yeah, over the space of 4 albums. I mean, you know, they're not doing 2.5 minute, like just whirlwind kind of punk songs. I mean, they actually have well-crafted songs on there. You can definitely feel kind of that 60s influence, kind of the garage rock in some ways, kind of the girl group. 60s girl group influence on that album. And they're kind of, you know, branching out their sound a little bit.
Yeah, there's actually a couple guitar solos on here. And this is also the first Ramones record I ever bought. So it would have that aspect to me. And, you know, I can still remember bringing it home, playing it, you know, here. I just want to have something to do. And I played that song, put the needle back, played it again. I'm like, damn, that is cool. So
how old were you?
I don't know exactly. I was a teenager because, I mean, the Ramones had been around for a while. It took me a few years before I got into them because I didn't really know what they were that much. You know, I live in a little town. It's not like there was a bunch of people going around talking about the Ramones and stuff. You know, they're talking about mostly bands like REO Speedwagon and Journey and, you know, things like that. So I was probably a little late to the party, but once I bought that first album, then I was like a fan for life. So
yeah. Now, was it a blind buy for you? I mean, had you heard of the Ramones when you went into the record store?
Yeah, I had heard. Well, I'm trying to think. Maybe I saw the movie. I can't remember.
High School?
Yeah, I can't remember if I saw the movie first or got that record first. Now I honestly I don't remember, but it was like close in that time period, and I saw something on them. And plus, I used to get. Do you remember Cream magazine?
Oh yeah,
yeah. I used to get that, and you know, because I get it because like Kiss was on the front or Aerosmith. But they always talk about these other bands, you know, the New York kind of bands and bands coming out of Detroit and stuff that I didn't really know. And, you know, sometimes, you know, like that's where I first heard of the Runaways, Blondie, bands like that. and Talking Heads. So I kind of every now and then would pick up on that, try to find out. So
Right. As the table turns, wants to know what's the topic. Well, the topic is we're showing our 10 desert island discs. This was a suggestion from last week's live stream. I think it was Mike's Got the Spins, who takes credit for that one. Daddy Bog says Rockaway Beach was a famous hangout in Queens, New York.
yeah, I didn't know that until much later. When I heard the song, I didn't know what it was, but
Yeah.
rock away beach.
Trevor says that Cream documentary was great.
Oh, I need to watch that. What's that on? Is that on?
Yeah, is that on a streaming service?
Hopefully he'll answer that.
Yeah. Right. Well,
yeah, because they I think, didn't they make a comeback or something? Or are they doing something now? I don't know. I keep seeing stuff of, with their Boy Howdy logo that they had. But I don't know.
Do they have an online magazine or something now? I don't know.
Yeah, maybe. I don't know, but I'd love to. I'll have to watch that documentary, whatever that's on. Hopefully he'll let us know here, Trevor.
Right.
What's your pick, Jeffrey?
All right. Well, my first one of my favorite bands. This would be in my top 10 favorite albums of all time. Flawless album. There's not a single track on here that I don't think is one of their best songs. Who's Next? Favorite Who album. One of my favorite albums of the 1970s. I mean, you got bookended with Baba O'Reilly and Won't Get Fooled Again. Two anthems that, rock groups are still covering today. Bargain, Behind Blue Eyes, even kind of the deeper tracks like Getting in Tune. This Song Is Over are great. I love the John Entwistle track, My Wife. Yeah. I think it's hilarious, just kind of, John Entwistle always had that dark sense of humor. I think it's one of John Entwistle's best songs, obviously. But yeah, 1971, produced by Glenn Johns, who had just the year before done some work with the Beatles for the Let It Be album. He also worked with the Eagles, and I forget the rest of his pedigree.
He's worked with Led Zeppelin too.
Yeah. But this has always been my favorite Who album. It's just a blockbuster, and I would have to have that at whatever island I was going to. Hopefully, it'd be a Sandals resort. But anyway.
Well, it's another complete album too, right? That's a start. It doesn't really have a bad song on that album.
No, not at all. And just the fact that they just come off of Tommy, the rock opera. There was the whole Lifehouse debacle that was originally going to be, the Who's Next was originally going to be this multimedia spectacular event where they were going to perform it live. It was going to be a movie. It was going to be a soundtrack. They were going to do live shows, and there was going to be some sort of, and I know Pete Townsend barely can communicate what his original vision was for the whole Lifehouse project, but I know, it's supposed to be like the ultimate interactive event where like the Who, from the vibes from the audience was going to stimulate them to, create new music. And it was very much ahead of its time. I don't think they've even come close to, because some things, like, the hoverboard and Back to the Future or whatever, that's something like, well, yeah, we came close to approximating that. There's certain things that were like, yeah, they were ahead of its time, but eventually they came to fruition. I don't think like we've seen anything like what Pete Townsend envisioned for, the Lifehouse project. And I think eventually, kind of like Brian Wilson with Smile, it's like, okay, this just isn't going to work out. I'm going to have to, cobble together the best songs that we had come up with for that project, which, damn, it doesn't feel, like Smiley Smile for me, like definitely felt like a compromise. You know, it was definitely not Smile, but I feel like this was almost what people said the Beatles should have done with the White Album. Like, okay, just get rid of like all the, you know, little bits and the mediocre songs and just put a solid album out. And yeah, I think the Who managed to edit themselves very well and put out a fantastic record.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned Brian Wilson, because that's just what I was getting ready to say. Every time I hear Pete Townsend, you know, kind of talk about what that album was supposed to be like, I'm like, he sounds like Brian Wilson when he's talking like that, because, you know, the rest of the band never understood it. They never understood what the hell he was talking about. And, you know, it just ends up, there's no way that if that would have been a double album, it would have been this good. You know, I mean, they'd already just done a double album with Tommy. It made perfect sense to do a single album this time. It would have been too bloated. You know, I mean, it's just like Tommy itself, right? You know, there's certain songs on Tommy that you could do without. You know, this way, it's all prime cuts. I mean, that album is just basically a greatest hits album that just all happened to come out at once. You know what I mean?
Well, and I wonder too, like Quadrophenia was a double album, the album after Who's Next. I mean, there's certainly some filler on that. I mean, people may disagree, but I think if they had condensed Quadrophenia into a single album, that might, you know, stand shoulder to shoulder with Who's Next, or even better than that, you know. And I think that was kind of another concept. At least it was a little more down to earth concept. Even though I think people, you know, over here in the United States had a hard time relating to the mods and the rocker conflict. But, you know, anyway, I you know, that's an interesting discussion. If you could make Quadrophenia a single album that could stand up to Who's Next, you know, what would that look like? But that's a discussion for another day.
That's for another day.
Yeah.
I'm trying to see if we got anything. Oh, Trevor said the Coda channel on Prime. I'm not sure I know what that is. I've never heard of that.
The Coda channel on Prime, Amazon Prime?
I guess. I mean, I have that. I didn't know there was a Coda channel, though. Music in the House. My first pick might be Jellyfish Belly Button. Great power pop album. I return to it over and over again. I'm not familiar with that one.
Yeah, what year is that? Music in the House? Because I may have to check that out. I'm always a sucker for power pop.
Yeah. Okay, well, I'll do my next pick while we're waiting here. So this is one that, you know, you'll shit on and other people will, but I don't care. And that is the album by ABBA from 1977. Pretty much for some of the same reasons I picked the Ramones. I love this album from start to finish. I can play the whole thing, and I feel like you know, if I'm going to be on an island, I tried to pick 10 albums that would be able to, you know, whatever mood I happen to be in, it's going to be able to make me happy during that mood. And ABBA does. I love this album, and it starts off with the song Eagle. And that's like my favorite song by the band. So I wanted to pick that. It's got, you know, this is still when they had very dramatic moments in some of their music. You know, I mean, being from Europe and everything, it just adds something, you know, their pop music is like a little different somehow. And that's what I always thought about ABBA. And it just puts me in a certain mood. So I'm taking this album with me.
Yeah, you know, I think, Gary, if you had showed that album maybe 10 years ago, I think people would probably, you know, give you a hard time about it, or maybe even make fun of you. But I think ABBA, you know, has really kind of undergone a kind of a, I don't know, re-evaluation or something. I think people regard ABBA higher now than they used to. And for me, I mean, I know like the hits, I know like their stuff that was on the radio. I don't know any of their deeper cuts. I couldn't tell you what was on that album. I mean, maybe if I saw the track list, I might be able to recognize some stuff. But, you know, I always see ABBA in the record store and I'm always like, I don't know. Like, I know Gary likes them a lot. I know other people really like ABBA, but I just wouldn't know. Even like if I were to like pick up one ABBA record, would that be the one you would say start with that album, and then if you like that one, then...
Yeah, that's what I would do. I think this is where they kind of started to mature a little bit more, because I think, you know, some of the songs on the early albums, you know, you would wince at, you know, because they have like some kind of, you know, goofy songs on some of those albums. But like even on Arrival, which is the album before this, that's where Dancing Queen comes from, but also the song Knowing Me, Knowing You, which I think is a very mature pop song. But, you know, they also have a few goofy songs that I know that like somebody like yourself would probably not appreciate. So I think this would be a good place to start. You know, I don't know. I might, if I find one, I'm going to send it to you. So this is my second copy, but I wouldn't send this one to you because the record's not in good shape. I bought this one just for the jacket because my original copy, the jacket doesn't look this good, but the record's in great shape. So.
Was there a movie that tied into that?
There was. Well, the movie came out like right around the same time, because it's a concert film that, you know, they added some silly stuff into. And the concert, though, was made before this album came out. But at the very end, like at the end of the movie, this stupid reporter that's been trying to follow him around and get an interview with him gets on the elevator, and all of a sudden there's ABBA. There's the four members of ABBA. You know, he keeps trying to get an interview and everybody's putting him off, and then there he is, and then they play a song off of this album as they're going up in this elevator. So there's the tie.
Very cool. Yeah, it was kind of their Song Remains the Same movie.
Yes, it is. It's kind of that silly, you know, but yet, okay. You know, if you're a fan of the band, you have to see it, you know.
Right.
So.
Do you have it on DVD?
No, I do have some other ABBA stuff, but I don't have that movie. I used to have it taped on VHS, but yeah, I don't have a DVD of it.
Okay. All right. Well, this is going to be another no-brainer. And I hate because it seems like so obvious and it's so cliche, but if I'm going to be honest, if I'm going to be authentic, this really would be one that I would take. Beach Boys, Pet Sounds. I mean, it's just, I really, I wanted to be like, well, don't be too obvious, pick another record. But I don't know, like the nearest one I might pick today. And I thought about that because I'm like, well, it's kind of got the best of Pet Sounds, but then because the Today album, you got side one, which is sort of like, early Beach Boys, kind of stripped down, just the band playing. And then side two, you've really got the first inklings of what was to come with Pet Sounds, because you've got songs like Please Let Me Wonder, which is definitely a more mature song. The production on there, you've got the Wrecking Crew on that side of the album. She Knows Me Too Well, which is one of my favorite all-time Beach Boys songs of all time. There's a song on there called I'm So Young, which is really a precursor to Wouldn't It Be Nice? But at the end of the day, like, there's no Beach Boys album that stands above Pet Sounds. And if you're going to try and tell me you're a Beach Boys fan and you don't think Pet Sounds is their best album, I think you're fooling yourself. It just is. And I don't care how many times people have said it. I know I probably went on about this when I did the video with Rich and Sam. It just is. It was the best album Brian Wilson of the Beach Boys ever put out. He never did anything remotely close to it, although Smile I think, would have been an interesting, uh, I don't know. I don't know if Smile's better. I still, having her Smile, I still think Pet Sounds is better. But yeah, there's just so many tracks. I mean, God Only Knows, Wouldn't It Be Nice, You Still Believe in Me. I Know There's an Answer, I Just Wasn't Made for These Times. It's just song after song. It didn't sound, it sounded like nothing else that was coming out at the time. It influenced so many artists. It still influences artists today. You can hear in so many artists, Pet Sounds influences. I think it just changed like the landscape of rock music and pop music. And I mean, much in the way the Beatles did. But for me, I mean, I just enjoy listening to it. And I never get tired of listening to it. It's one of those that I could play 10 times in a row and not get tired of it. So.
And it sounds great.
It does. Yeah.
I mean, it's got a terrific, such a unique sound, the recording of that album. I mean, I love to listen to it. And, I don't know if I was going to pick a single studio album, it would definitely be Pet Sounds. But I don't know. If I had to pick one, I mean, I hate to say it, but I'd probably go for a Greatest Hits. Just because I like the evolution of the Beach Boys, but I really like a lot of that early stuff too, just because of it just makes me feel very nostalgic. When I listen to those old Beach Boys songs, they're so simple, but yet they're so well written.
Mm-hmm.
And the harmonies are great. And, I just feel like I'm in the early 60s or something. There's an innocence to those songs. And, Pet Sounds is definitely, it still has the innocence, but it also has this weariness to it, that was already starting to creep into some of the songs, but that album is much more melancholy. And I mean, I love it. And I think that's what makes it great, but I don't know. It would be hard for me. I think if I knew that was my only Beach Boys album, I'd be saying, but I want to hear some of these other songs too, so I don't know. But if
the thing about the Beach Boys is, name me one Beach Boys song from the 60s that is negative or a downer or complaining, or I mean, they're just all, I think that's why so many people enjoy those records, because they're all about fun and they're all about this utopian vision of California and surfing and cars and girls. I mean, it's almost like a 50s style innocence in those lyrics, and I think it's not until Pet Sounds where you start hearing kind of more of the mature themes. And love is complicated, relationships are complicated, and you never heard that in any real Beach Boy lyric up to that point. It was all about, let's go hang out at the beach and look at my car, and
let's go surfing, even though we don't know how, let's throw in some words.
Right. But I mean, that's what I kind of enjoy. I kind of enjoy that innocence of, they were simpler times back in the early 60s, and and then as the 60s wore on, things got more complicated. Things got more serious, I guess you could say. And the Beach Boys had to adapt, but they didn't adapt well enough. And I think Pet Sounds was the last Beach Boys album to be in the top 10.
Yeah, that it's funny to think, how early, well, not early, but fairly early in the 60s, the Beach Boys were kind of already out of favor.
Yeah.
But then they end up coming back, and they're just eternal.
Yeah. All right, we got some comments here. I feel like we're getting a little behind in the comments. So Gary bashing our Beach Boys, Jeff, says Sam. I'm leaving. Haha. He's not bashing.
That's
Gary, I agree. Beach Boys 63 to 66 were the best sounds. Mike's got the spins. It's your topic, Mike. It's our Desert Island Disc.
Yeah.
I'm bugged at my old man. Okay, yeah, that was kind of a tongue-in-cheek Brian Wilson talking about what an asshole his dad was. So yeah, I heard that she and him, Emward and Zoe Deschanel, have a Brian Wilson tribute coming out. That's very cool. Jayhawks, Hollywood Town Hall. I got that somewhere. Yeah, Hollywood Town Hall. That'd be a great one. I love that one. Hold on a second.
Ernesto says we're putting him to sleep.
Okay, Gary, what's your third one now?
Okay, my next one is, maybe this is kind of more in the line of like what you've been saying. It's an obvious one, but I'm going with Bruce Springsteen, Darkness on the Edge of Town. Another complete album. And this, I wanted something that was early Springsteen, but yet, when he was kind of changing a little bit. And I think that this is a change from Born to Run. I thought this was another kind of step into his writing. And, this to me is just a perfect album. Badlands, Adam Raised a Cain, Something in the Night, Candy's Room. Jesus, I can't tell you how much I love to put this on, turn all the lights off and just listen to that. It sounds so good. And then followed by Racing in the Street. This album sounds excellent to me. I love the production on that. And then you got the Promised Land Factory, Streets of Fire, Prove It All Night. That's such a great one. That's a rocker. And then it ends with Darkness on the Edge of Town, which is just one fucking amazing song. When he screams, those lines towards the end, you're, yeah, I'll be there. I'll be on that hill. And what a cover too. I just love that album cover. And this is just great lyrics, great music. Love it. I love this album.
Well, and it was never going to be easy following up Born to Run. So he certainly, a formidable task to come up with an album that was just as good as that album, if not a little better. But and I think he recorded almost an album's worth of songs that never even made it onto that record, because I think that record, The Promise, that came out, I don't know, about 10 years ago or whenever it was, I think those were all like outtake songs that maybe were under consideration for that record, but didn't actually make the final cut.
Well, he had a hard time with this record. He was fighting his record label and everything during this time period. That's why it took 3 years before this album came out.
Which was an eternity.
Sam is on here trolling me. Sam St. John is, just so you know. Sam's trying to give me some shit. But
3 years in the 70s was like, 20 years today.
Yeah, now, you don't think anything of a band doing that. But back then, they'd be like, oh, well, this band must be done with. They went 3 years without doing an album. But.
Well, Ernesto Ramos has been giving it to us, but now he insists he was just joking, which I'm glad to hear. Prove It All Night. Yes, Mike. I was just going to mention that song. That's one of my favorites off of that record. Has anyone picked up any of the Springsteen box sets? Well, I know he's got a couple. Is there a particular one? I know there was the what was the one where it was like Tracks or something like that, or the one
Yeah, he
where
had Tracks. He had that early on. He had that live thing from what it was 74 or 5 to something. And then, yeah, I mean, he had that. It's not a box set, but he had that double live album out there at the end of the year. That's excellent. That's an excellent live record. God, that is so good.
Yeah. Welcome back, Ray. I'm glad you jumped back in. And since Ray jumped back in, and I know Ray is a Beatle fan, my next pick, I will show the Beatles album that I picked.
Beatles.
Not Abbey Road, not the White Album, not Sgt. Pepper, not Revolver, not Let It Be. It's not even a British album. How about that? It's not even.
It's not even the Beatles.
It's not even the Beatles. It's Mary Cheap and Carpenter. No. Anyway, it's.
Oh, that's it. Yeah.
The American Rubber Soul. Now, if you heard me earlier, I said this isn't necessarily my favorite album by each artist, but I have such an affection for this album, and I think it's because of the age I was when I got it, the fact that it was, my uncle who bought it for me, and I'd never heard a lot of these songs before when I played it, but I mean, it starts off with I've Just Seen a Face, which is a fantastic Paul McCartney, kind of a folk rock track. You've got Norwegian Wood, which I love. It just introduced the sitar to rock music. You got You Won't See Me, which Brian Wilson cites as a definite inspiration, because Brian Wilson, he said this was the inspiration for Pet Sounds. He heard this, and not necessarily the flavor of the music, not necessarily the songs. It was the fact that the Beatles had put together an album with no filler. It was great from start to finish, and he wanted to do the same. Because if you know anything about the early Beach Boys albums, there are some great songs, but there also was just some songs that they'd thrown on there to pad out the album. Yeah, even the George song, Think for Yourself, is great. Michelle, I think, is one of Paul's best ballads. I love Girl, I'm Looking Through You, and My Life is such an iconic track. Wait, the misogynistic Run for Your Life, even. I know you're not supposed to say you like that song, but I think it just flows together well. I mean, I like the British Rubber Soul, but just for me, I've always preferred this to the UK version because I think thematically, sound-wise, it works as a great folk rock album. And I know Josh, I think, would agree with me if he were here on our live stream. I think there's something about the 1965 Beatles, I mean, they never looked cooler. They were, each album was a progression over the last album. I love this album to death, and I just can't imagine being without it for an extended period of time. So curious what other people are saying on the chat. Ray, American Rubber Soul, love the American LPs. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's what I grew up on. It wasn't until the CDs came out in 1987, I think it was, late 86, early 87, that I, ever heard of, with the Beatles or was introduced to Beatles for Sale or some of those different UK track listings. So yeah, I like Yesterday and Today is just a harder rock album. So
I like
Brian Wilson would agree. I know he would, Sam.
You made that comment about, run for your life. You better run for your life, little girl. I like that because to me, I mean, that's like that's like a blues lyric, right? That's the kind of stuff that Howlin' Wolf and Muddy Waters would always say, things like that. And, I think it's cool because, people were still thinking of the Beatles as just so sweet and everything at that point. And they were kind of changing with this. And, they also started out as more of a, they were playing the clubs. They were over there in Germany, all hepped up on speed and everything and playing 90 miles an hour, doing all these hard rocking 50 songs, but they were rocking them up and stuff. And, they were playing blues songs and things. I don't know. I like the fact that it's like that kind of lyric and the Beatles singing.
Yeah. Well, the opening line, "I'd rather see you dead, little girl, than to be with another man," is actually lifted from an Elvis Presley song called "Baby, Let's Play House." Rather see you dead, little girl, than to be with another man. Oh, but that, like, those early, I mean, not to get off on an Elvis thing, but like those Sun records that he'd cut back in 55 or 56 or whatever, that's what got John Lennon excited about music. That's what made him want to play music himself. And so, he borrowed that lyric from that Elvis Presley song and, wrote an entire song around it. John Lennon was notoriously jealous. And I think that's really kind of, the depths to, how John Lennon would, be possessive about a woman and all that. But I mean, I know he's like, I think in later years, he said, he didn't like that song. He just wrote it very quickly to, have enough songs for the record or whatever. But I like it. I do. The lyrical content aside, I still think it's a great song. And I think, it's definitely a tongue in cheek.
Well, yeah, sure.
Yeah. Kind of song. So I make no apologies for it. I love that song. So, all right, what do we got? Marcus, John crushes on the Rubber Soul album. Yeah, absolutely. And there was a period where, the early period of the Beatles, John Lennon was definitely, I think, a better songwriter, or at least a more prolific songwriter than Paul was. And then John started getting into LSD and marijuana. And, I think he started having some self-doubt and insecurity. And I think in like the mid 60s, starting with Revolver. I mean, the American Revolver only has 2 John Lennon songs on it.
But they're great.
Yeah. I mean, Sgt. Pepper, I think was probably, for me, one of his greatest albums too, because you got Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds, A Day in the Life is great. So, but Paul, I think in the late 60s kind of, stood more toe to toe with John. But anyway, I don't want to make this a Beatles discussion. It's a Desert Island discussion, but yeah, I think John definitely crushed it on Rubber Soul. It's one of his strongest albums for sure. Music in the House says, my number 8 would probably be Big Star, #1 record. The documentary really gave me an appreciation for the hard work and struggles between Chris Bell and Alex Chilton. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I've got that on DVD, that Big Star documentary. It's like Nothing Can Hurt Me, I think it's called, something like that. But yeah, they have an interesting story. And they called it #1 record. And I think that karma came back to bite him on the ass because it was not a #1 record in any way, shape, or form. It was not a popular record, even though it inspired a host of bands. It was such an influential record, like commercially, it bombed. Alex Chilton had success with the Box Tops. And it was almost kind of, it's kind of like Steve Winwood, where he had success with the Spencer Davis Group, then got into Traffic and had more success, at least from an artistic standpoint. And I think it's sort of like with Alex Chilton, started out with the Box Tops and then had this brilliant band, Big Star, that was such a leap creatively, artistically. But yeah, Big Star is that'd be a fantastic pick. Marcus, White Album and Rubber Soul are 2 of John's strongest albums. Yeah, agreed. Sam St. John, maybe the Tom Bell Sessions for me, Elton John. Are you serious about that, Sam? I'm just wondering because that was like an EP. But yeah, Ray just completed his Big Star catalog. Mike's got the spins. Great choice for me. It's Abbey Road because of Golden Slumber. Yeah, the Golden Slumbers medley. Yeah, that was a hard one not to pick Abbey Road because there's so much to love on that album. But yeah, all right. What do you got next, Gary?
Okay, so like I said, I'm trying to pick albums to fit different moods. And so that's why I went with something, even though this is like, newer and whatnot. But I went with Peach by Larkin Poe. This is a sister duo. And they do, here's the back of it. You can see the track listing there. And, they do remakes of a lot of blues songs and some rock.
Black Betty?
Yeah, they do Black Betty. But like they do Come On In My Kitchen, which is Robert Johnson. They do John the Revelator by Son House and Preaching Blues, and they do fantastic jobs of these. They rock them up. They don't rock it up like in any kind of metal way, but they do it like in a hard blues way. They've got amazing lap steel slide guitar and then electric guitar to go with it. And, I'm going to have some kind of blues, but I like the fact that they slightly modernize it. And their albums to me are just an enjoyable listen. And so this would be an album I would take. There's a couple others of them that I considered, but I went for this one just for one thing. I just totally love their cover of Preachin' Blues. If anybody wants to look it up, Larkin Poe, Preachin' Blues, I think they do a fantastic job. And so I would take something by them.
Now, where does that album fall in their catalog? Is that their first album? Is it their third
No,
album?
this is I think it's their third album. I know they've put out 2 albums since then. Well, 3 albums, because one of them's a covers album where they did like more modern songs and stuff. I mean, they usually have like a couple original songs and then a lot of covers. This one came out like 2018. So okay. It's been out for a while.
Yeah, I hear people talk about Larkin Poe, like they love Larkin Poe. I don't know if I've ever heard a Larkin Poe song before. But I mean, everything you say is like, oh, that sounds like something I would definitely like. And they're nice to look at.
Yeah, they're pretty cute. And that helps.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I'm on that island, I guess,
Yeah. Craig just joined us. Larkin Poe loves Larkin Poe. Larkin Poe is a new one to Music in the House. Ray says metal would be Scorpions' Love Drive, a great LP. He also says Stones, every LP with Brian Jones. Yeah, I agree. I'm totally a Brian Jones guy. 60s Stones is my favorite period. I mean, I like the 70s Stones and some of the 80s stuff, but yeah, 60s, that is my favorite era of the Stones. And well, what the hell? Why not? Since we're on the topic of it, one of my records here, although it is not in the Brian Jones era, it's actually the Mick Taylor era. Let It Bleed, my favorite Rolling Stones album of all time. Having just said Brian Jones is my favorite era of the Rolling Stones, I pick a Mick Taylor album. But I mean, to be fair, I think he plays auto harp on a song. And You Got the Silver, I think. So it's technically he's on it somewhere. I don't know if they were just giving him credit because he'd passed away, but I mean, again, and that's kind of a, just like Who's Next was bookended by Baba O'Reilly and Won't Get Fooled Again. This is bookended by Gimme Shelter, and You Can't Always Get What You Want.
Yeah.
I mean, Rolling Stones during this period were just untouchable. You had Beggar's Banquet, you had Let It Bleed, you had Sticky Fingers, you had Exile on Main Street. Name me another band from that era that had 4 rock solid albums in succession. I mean, with all within 5 years. I mean, this wasn't like, oh yeah, it took them 10 years and they put those 4 up. No, I mean, in that short space of time, I mean, they just could do no wrong. Midnight Rambler, one of the best blues songs they ever did. Monkey Man, I did an entire episode just on the intro to that song. I just love that track. Love in Vain, a great Robert Johnson cover. Live With Me with that great Bill Wyman bass intro, that chugging rhythm. It's so cool. Yeah, Let It Bleed. I listen to this more than any other Stones album. It's my favorite, and I'm not going anywhere for any period of time without taking that album with me. So
what's funny is that, you name those 4 albums that they did in a row, which, generally considered, by most people, their best albums. I like to throw Aftermath in there, but it's crazy that the last of those 4 albums was a double album. It's like
I know
they're cranking out these amazing 5-star albums one after the other, and then they're like, hey, now let's do a double album. It's like, how much you got in the tank, boys? Jeez.
Yeah, well, and if you've seen any of the deluxe sets that they put out, I mean, they had even more songs that never saw the light of day that were fantastic as well. So yeah, we got some love for Rush here. Mike got the spins, had 2112 as his number 3. Ray loves Rush, Caress of Steel, and 2112. Yeah, I love the Necromancer off Caress of Steel.
Actually, Caress of Steel, I did not put it in here, but I had it. I had it on my list because I love that, and that's just a great listen. And plus, I thought, if I'm on this island, hopefully I'm able to get stoned every now and then, and so I want to put on Rush, Caress of Steel, because that would fit that very well. It's just Necromancer. Yeah, God, that's great. That's great shit. Yeah, man. I love it.
Yeah, I agreed, Mike. Tough to beat. Let It Be. But if any album's going to beat Let It Be, it's going to be one of the 4 that I mentioned. And I wouldn't argue with anybody. If you picked any one of those 4 and said, it's your favorite Stones album or that's the Stones' best album, I would have a hard time arguing that point, honestly. Yeah, Satanic Majesties, that's one of those where I think for a long time people thought that was the Stones' worst album. It was an embarrassment. They were trying to do a carbon copy, or at least trying to copy the Beatles, Sgt. Pepper. But I mean, that's got some great stuff on there. I mean, you got 2000 Man, which is a bit quirky, but Kiss did a great cover of that. The land. I mean, there's just some Citadel is a great
Citadel.
track.
I love that. Yeah.
Yeah, She's a Rainbow. 2000 Light Years from Home. Yeah, 2000 Light Years from Home is my favorite track on that record. But
now that's
Lakeside Park. Yeah, agreed. Caress of Steel, Lakeside Park.
Lakeside Park. Everyone would gather on the 24th of May. At Lakeside Park to watch the fireworks display.
Was that in Queens, New York?
That was in Canada, of course, yo.
I thought maybe it was maybe Rockaway Beach was on Lakeside, but I don't know. Or near Lakes. I don't know. Whatever. What am I talking about? I don't know.
I don't know what you're talking about most of the time, but I like you, so I just go along.
I just go off,
That's all right. That's why people love you. Okay. Do we have any more we need to catch up on? Wait a minute. Mike. Ray. Oh, yeah. The Fountain of Laminette, or Laminette, however you pronounce that. I know the song. I have all this stuff on the SD card on my phone. I just need this phone. Mike, I would need to hear the Rush song Xanadu.
Yeah, they made a movie about that song even.
Yeah. And they wrote a story about it many years before the song ever came out. It's amazing.
Yeah, they did, right.
Okay, my next pick. So if I'm there, you know, I mean, I got to have some heavy metal also. So, like when I feel aggressive, if I got bit by a spider and I'm pissed off, or a coconut just hit me in the head or something. But I am going to go with Black Sabbath, Mob Rules. This is, of course, Ronnie James Dio on this, and Vinny Appice on drums to fill in. But you still got Tony and Geezer on here. And this is just great, man. I love the sound of this record. The drums just have this heavy sound to them that without it doesn't overpower anything, but it's like the drums are even like tuned low, just like the guitars and stuff. And it's got these fat, thick riffs on here. And some of these songs, man, they just sound evil and dark, but without how like a lot of metal bands, especially, this black metal and death metal and things up your butt metal, things like that, where it's just ludicrous. They're so
Right.
over the top, but this is doesn't quite get to that point to where it's over the top, and it's just heavy. It's another album that I can listen to start to finish. Yeah, there you got it. It's got this cheery looking cover, and it's songs like Over and Over and Sign of the Southern Cross, Falling Off the Edge of the World. These are these big dramatic songs that are just thudding and just powerful. Voodoo. That's the title track, Mob Rules. I love the way that it's got that E5150, and it's it has all those weird noises into it. And then it finally goes and it leads into that guitar riff that goes into Mob Rules. So I got to bring this with me for when I'm in the mood for some metal.
Yeah, well, Sign of the Southern Cross is just such an epic, it's almost like the centerpiece of that album. And Ronnie James Dio, he starts off singing so gentle.
Yeah.
And it's just such a gentle, opening. And then it just hammers you over the head. And it's there's the Ronnie James Dio that we know, because it almost sounds sort of like a Jethro Tull a little bit at the beginning of that track, but.
Yeah, he's in top form on this. And everybody is, it's a great one. So we've got, let me see, what do we got here? Mike's got this band. He says Country Girl off of here. He's also talking about Falling Off the Edge of the World. That's a great one. Craig says he would need Judas Priest, Defenders of the Faith. That almost made my list for sure. I love that album. He also likes the debut from Wasp. Ray likes Demons and Wizards by Uriah Heep. Magician's Birthday too. Yeah, I'd probably pick Magician's Birthday. Yeah, you're right. He would be great to have there. He also says, got to have some Yes, Close to the Edge. Yes would be very good to have on there. Is that your next pick?
It is.
There you go.
Because,
is that synchronicity?
I mean, like I say, if I'm going to be on a desert island, I got to have some progressive rock. And my favorite progressive rock album is Close to the Edge. Epic album. I mean, you got the title track Alone, which, this has always for me been a great, if you're taking a road trip or you have to drive somewhere far, put this album on because it is a journey. I mean, it takes you so many places. I mean, Close to the Edge, it starts off, it just beats you over the head, and then it kind of slows down. That whole I get up, I get down, and then you got Rick Wakeman with the church organ. It sounds like he's in this cathedral, and it's like the Phantom of the Opera moment. I always call it the Phantom of the Opera moment, where din, 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 din. I mean, it's like majestic, and then and then it like totally like goes batshit crazy, to like wind the song down. And then, you just catch your breath, and then you've got And You and I, which again is just another holy shit. Fantastic track. Siberia and Katru, or however you pronounce it. Great way to close the album, but it does not. You're insane if this is not your favorite progressive rock album, unless you pick Pink Floyd, a Pink Floyd album, and then I would be like, okay, I'm giving you some leeway there. But I mean, don't tell me this isn't Yes's best album. This is, for me, always has, always will be my favorite progressive rock album. And I mean, again, another great band with Yes. You had the Yes album, you had Fragile, and then you had, Close to the Edge. It's like, holy shit, these guys are just incredible. And then a double album, after those three amazing ones with Tales from Topographic Oceans. And let's throw in a triple live album while we're at it, like as if we haven't bombarded you enough. Who do you think you are, Chicago? But anyway, I mean, yeah, talk about prolific. I mean, seriously, any band today, if they were to replicate the Yes album, Fragile, and Close to the Edge, it'd take them 20 years. I mean, it just would. You would not have a band that would put 3 albums of that quality. It would take them 3 years to do it. Back in the 70s, they were just putting out a masterpiece like every year. That was just the pace of it all. And it's just breathtaking when you think about it, because any of those 3 albums could be a top 10 album easily. But so, yeah, I'm glad. Who was it who said Close to the Edge? Yeah, Ray. Yeah, I feel like Ray and I, our record collections are probably so similar, because everything he's said is I totally agree with. Eagles, Hotel California. Yeah, another great one. Journey, Escape. Yeah, Don't Stop Believing. Stone in Love. Absolutely. Kansas. Yeah, Prague, Kansas. Gotta include Kansas in any discussion about great progressive rock bands or progressive rock albums. Mike's Got the Spins, female artist Whitney Houston, second album, Whitney.
Well, hey, that's what you're.
Yeah. I'm not gonna, there's no, I'm not.
Right. Whatever you would
disagree with anybody, because it's funny. I was in Cedar Point. I was standing in line, and I want to dance with somebody. Came out, they got like the screen while you're waiting in line. They play videos and stuff, and I Want to Dance with Somebody came on, and I'm like, number one, she was hot. Number two, she had the voice of an angel. I mean, one of the best female vocalists.
Yeah.
Soul vocalist, whatever. I mean, she was amazing. Not my style of music, admittedly, but I will concede. I mean, she was a brilliant, gifted, talented artist, and I can see why so many people love her. Absolutely.
Yeah. Oh, Vance is on here. He said it is amazing when you think about the volume of albums that bands put out in the 70s. Yeah. And they were so good.
Right.
I mean, there are albums now that are just so revered. All those albums you just mentioned by Yes are all considered classics, right? And they just, well, let's make an album, we'll tour, we'll go back, we'll make an album, we'll tour, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm not going to use Close to the Edge because you just did. You just talked about it, because I had the same kind of mentality of, well, I got to have a progressive rock, but that's okay. because I had some others that I was just fighting to get on here. And now it is in my slot. So there we go. What else we got here? Somebody else said something. I don't know. There's another one. Frank Marino, Mahogany Rush live. That's some famous stuff there. What about the Red Wings greatest hits? Nobody cares about that, about the Red Wings.
The Red Wings greatest hits? You mean like the Colorado beatdown? If you're going to talk about, I mean, yeah, don't get me started on Red Wings history.
Don't get me started.
Yeah.
Grand Funk
yeah.
Phoenix. Do you have Phoenix by Grand Funk Railroad? I don't have that.
You know, I like Grand Funk Railroad, but I don't own a single album by Grand Funk Railroad. I've got a greatest hits, and I know they came from Flint, Michigan. So I feel like that's sort of, you know, how can you be from Michigan and not like Grand Funk? I don't not like Grand Funk. I just don't own anything by them. And a lot of it has to do with the fact that any copies I find of Grand Funk albums are like all beat up to hell. You know, I've never seen a Grand Funk Railroad album that was in anything other than VG condition. For whatever reason, people, and probably because they played them to death, but you know, they're all worn, they're all dog-eared, they have ring wear, they've got, you know, just they're in terrible condition. I can never find a great Grand Funk Railroad album. If I did, I'd buy it, but they're all beat to hell. They're all in the dollar bins, or they look like they even, you know.
I got that live album that you always see out there. But yeah, the live album, like you said, it's always beat up. Even the copy that I have is mediocre, you know, at best, as far as what shape it's in. It's playable, but you know, you'll hear pops and stuff every now and then. And I tell you what, man, that live album is like heavy.
I had it at one point, and I gave it to Tony from Two from the Trunk, because he had like a very beat up copy, and I know like he loved that album, but the copy that he had was like in really like not great condition. So I just sent it to him because I'm like, you're gonna love it more than I do. I'll find another copy down the road if I want it badly enough. But he's way more of a Grand Funk fan than I was, so I just gave it to him. But that was the only Grand Funk album I ever owned, and you know, maybe I'll pick it up again if I find another, you know, decent copy down the line.
I was kind of wondering if anybody out here has seen that, like John Anderson is doing a solo tour, and he's performing Close to the Edge, and then, you know, some other songs on there. And I just wonder if anybody's going to that. I know that he's got like, I'm not sure what his backing group is, like some kind of performing arts school or something. I think it's like he's got like a whole bunch of musicians behind him, and they're all pretty young. I mean, you'll have to look it up. You had to look it up on YouTube. I mean, I heard like one of, I think they were doing You and I or something, but it sounded pretty good.
Those aren't easy songs to play. So, I mean, if he's in front of a band that's playing Close to the Edge, I mean, I got to imagine if they're going to do it and pull it off convincingly, they better be like really damn good students. Because that's, yeah, I mean, I'll have to check that out. I didn't realize he wasn't touring with established, you know, musicians.
Yeah, you have to look it up on YouTube. I mean, he's got a show somewhere. I think it's in Akron. I think that's the only place he's playing in Ohio, which is, you know, Jesus, that's pretty far. I mean, I'm closer to Detroit than I am Akron.
Yeah.
As far as that goes, but I don't know. I wouldn't mind seeing it, because I've never got to see Yes or any kind of version of it.
Right.
Okay. So my next pick is kind of definitely not progressive rock. It is more power pop rock, or whatever you want to call it. I just call it rock and roll. One of my favorite albums of all time, Heaven Tonight by Cheap Trick. I'm not going to any island without taking this. This to me is, God, this is just another perfect album. You know, starts off with Surrender, which is one of those overplayed songs that I can still listen to and still get into. Most songs like that, I have a hard time getting into it, but this I still can. Stiff Competition is on here. One of my favorite Cheap Trick songs. California Man, On Top of the World, High Roller. God, you know, the vocals on that song are just so beautiful. Robin Zander, one of my favorite singers in rock. And the man still can sing. He can still do it live. He is, you know, we talk about these singers getting older. You know, obviously most of them can't do what they did. This guy, you know, he might not be quite exactly where he was, but man, he is still great. And just do it and live, just doing it live and not holding back. You know, I mean, he's still hitting those notes. Avita Zane is on here, Taking Me Back on the radio. You know, the first album I got by Cheap Trick was Live at Budokan, you know, like a lot of people. Then I went back and got this. This was a studio album that they were touring on for that. And it just, after those two albums in a row, I'm like, oh my God. I mean, I love Cheap Trick. And, you know, this to me is their best album. They've never topped it. It was their third album. I mean, they've made some great albums, but this is just to me a 5-star record, and I can listen to it over. I have listened to it over and over again, and I never get tired of this record. So it's going with me. Heaven Tonight.
Yeah, I don't know much about Cheap Trick, but I do find it hilarious that starting with In Color, they only showed Robin Zander and the other guy like on the cover, and then like the most attractive members of the band got to make the front cover, and then the two ugly dudes were always on the back cover. Yeah. You know, because you got In Color, Heaven Tonight, at Budokan. It's like the two most photogenic guys, and then you got the two guys that look like, you know, they worked at a steel mill on the back cover.
Oh yeah, I can still remember. They had come out. They were on some award show that I was watching, and I'm all excited watching it. And you know, my dad's sitting back there in his chair. I'm down in front of the TV, and you know, they come out. And, you know, of course, my mom, she always has all these stupid comments. My dad, he's just laughing. He's just like, what? Because what are these guys? Because, you know, to him, Rick Nielsen kind of based his look a little bit on the old Bowery Boys type look that, you know, when they had these movie serials back in the 40s or in 50s. Because, you know, my dad knew that stuff. And so he saw that and he laughed, and he thought Bunny Carlos on the drums was hilarious looking. And he's like, he just thought they were a hilarious looking band. But I'm like, well, but they're awesome. You know,
they are.
You want to do some comments here?
Getting a lot of Cheap Trick love.
Good. Brian said he saw John Anderson in 2019. He had a School of Rock type kid band open for him. Well, maybe it's kind of like that. Akron, home of the Zips. Brian Reynolds. He did Starship Troopers, Roundabout, and Owner of a Lonely Heart, from my memory. Sam, as in just, oh yeah, Sam St. John had said something about the other John, the country John Anderson. Said, imagine him singing for Yes.
Yeah, with the H.
Yeah. Mike's got the spins. Yes. Do you want to go to heaven tonight? I love that song. Would you like to go to heaven tonight? Ray, I have their whole catalog. Taking Me Back, Cheap Trick. Mike says, when they do Heaven Tonight, you get goosebumps. Yes, you do. Cheap Trick, says Sam. Another band I'm missing in my collection. Oh, I gotta get Sam a Cheap Trick record. Vance, Zep Pearl. Cheap Trick or Road Dog, still killing it every night. Yes. Heaven Tonight was his first Cheap Trick LP. Ray, I once made a joke that my friend and I would be on the front cover of a Cheap Trick LP, and our other two friends would be on the back. That's a good
you got the movie stars on the cover and the pedophiles on the back of the album.
The pedophiles on the back. Sam St. John is being a dork. He says, Rick Nielsen, didn't he go to a garden party? Craig says, I saw Cheap Trick open up for Morley Crue. I don't know who Morley Crue is. Maybe he means Motley. Motley Crue in the 80s at the Hammersmith Odeon. I am always on the lookout for Cheap Trick's Standing on the Edge record. If I see that, Craig, I will pick it up for you. I mean, I have my own copy, but if I find another one, I'll grab it. It says, great pick. Sam, start with Heaven Tonight or Dream Police. That's Mike talking to Sam. Those would be great to start with. Mike, I have seen Cheap Trick more times than any other band, 15 times. Yeah, I've got to be close to that. I've seen them a lot. I would go see them again. They're going to be in Toledo, but I think I have to go to a family reunion on that night. Craig says, wow, that's sweet, Mike. Ray, Need Your Love. Cheap Trick gives goosebumps. I agree. Ray says it has the Lennon mother scream in it. It does. Craig, I had a friend go see them in Vegas a couple of years ago, and I have 2 picks from Rick now. Awesome. Mike says, agreed. Need Your Love is awesome. Okay, we're caught up.
All right, cool. Well, you talk about goosebumps, and the album that I'm going to pick gives me more goosebump moments than most any other album in my collection. And it's an artist that I don't talk enough about, although I did do a video recently where I did spend some time talking about this particular artist. But this is an album that takes me back all the way to my youth. Growing up, my dad was a huge fan of this artist, heard this artist all the time growing up. And the album that he played most often was this one, Goodbye Yellow Brick Road by Elton John. And I hope Basil's not listening, because this is a fucking incredible double album. I mean, when I was growing up, I think I was in 4th grade, we had this thing in class where she would pick, like, certain students could, like, everybody could take turn bringing in an album, and she would play a song for the class. It's something that I think was done in the 70s where, bring an album in and we'll play it. I've heard stories of that happening. And for me, Funeral for a Friend right into Love Lies Bleeding. Even now, like, I love that song, those songs together. By a long mile, my favorite Elton John album, one of my favorite albums of the 1970s. I mean, Candle in the Wind, Benny and the Jets, Goodbye Yellow Brick Road. Gray Seal is fantastic. I've seen that movie too. Sweet Painted Lady, Ballad of Danny Bailey. It's just such a breathtaking double album. Elton John at his peak. Just great pop rock, 70s rock. Saturday Night's All Right for Fighting. My favorite sides are probably side 1, side 4, where you got Saturday Night's All Right for Fighting, Roy Rogers, Social Disease, Harmony. Yeah, I love Elton John, but that is my favorite Elton John album. And I mean, what else can be said about it? It's just one of those classic albums. Never got any better for me with Elton John than that record. Vance says Elton is a good example of what I said about 70s bands. Didn't he put out like 2 albums a year for a couple of years? Yeah. I mean, you had like the year before, Don't Shoot Me, I'm Only the Piano Player. The year before that, or it might have even been the same year. Didn't he put out Honky Chateau? and Don't Shoot Me, I'm Only the Piano Player. I think both of those were 72, if I'm not mistaken. And then he put out Goodbye Yellow Brick Road. And then Caribou was kind of a piece of shit album, although, I mean, could you blame him after, because, Honky Chateau, before that, you had Man Across the Water. Before that, you had Tumbleweed Connection, which were great albums. And then he recovered from Caribou with Captain Fantastic and the Brown Dirt Cowboy, which is another brilliant album. Yeah, I mean, Elton John was one of those artists in the 70s. And I'm just kidding about Caribou. Caribou's got some moments on it. It's just, it was about, I mean, nothing is going to be able to follow up Goodbye Yellow Brick Road, but
yeah, people like your pick. Sam, Mike, both do. Sam mentioned some of the deeper cuts, which, yeah, you were talking about. That's what makes that such a great album, is because the hits are hits for a reason, because they're fantastic songs. I mean, the title track itself.
I mean, think about all the different styles of music that are on that record. Yeah. You got reggae, you got country rock, you got the piano ballads, you got hard rock, you got progressive rock. I mean, he just does all of these different, he's not a one-note artist. He does so many different styles of music and does them brilliantly. And you got Bernie Taupin, who was never, writing better than he did on those early Elton John albums. And, that was another difficult album. It was not an album that just came easily. Didn't they record that in Jamaica, like Nassau or something, if I'm not mistaken? I don't remember the whole genesis of that album, but I know it did not come easily to them. And I think some of the best albums were albums that were born out of a struggle, or there was some sort of conflict, or I mean, I know it was not an easy album for him to make, but yeah, I mean, he's another one of those artists that, I mean, how he could consistently put out great albums when you were expected to put out one, or in some cases 2 albums a year. I mean, it just blows my mind.
And he goes and makes a double album, right? So
right. Yeah.
Ray says, we used to bring LPs to Catholic school and do a pantomime to Sweet Leaf in 8th grade and didn't get expelled. He loves the first 10 Elton LPs. Mike says Yellow Brick Road is amazing. Hey, Trucker Kev's on here. He said CCR did the same thing, 1968 to 1970, a 2-year period. Yeah.
CCR put 3 albums out in 1969, and they were all like masterpieces.
That's probably one of the most amazing accomplishments in rock music, is CCR in 1969 putting out 3 albums.
Yeah.
And they're all good.
You had Bayou Country, you had Willie and the Poor Boys, you had Cosmos Factory. I mean, in the same year, 1969. I mean,
it's amazing.
That will never happen again in the history of rock and roll.
Okay. So I had to run in the room, because how I told you I had this one, but you used it. I realized I didn't have my other pick. So it doesn't seem like a good transition from these 2 albums, but this is the way I had it on my paper. And that is Women and Children First by Van Halen. This to me is a great Van Halen record to take, because for one thing, I want a Van Halen record. It's got to be David Lee Roth era. And this one has some good variety to it. I mean, it's got songs like Could This Be Magic? Or Could This Be Love? I mean, it's got songs like that on there, but it's also got songs like Romeo Delight and Fools, Take Your Whiskey Home.
Does David Lee Roth play the acoustic guitar, the bluesy acoustic guitar at the beginning of Take Your Whiskey Home?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Not many people know. They think he was just a vocalist, but he was a talented musician as well.
Yeah. It also, I don't think I have this. Let me see. Nah, I used to have that weird ass poster that was in here where he's like on the chain link fence.
Yeah.
I remember I had it up for a while, and then I kind of thought, I don't know, that's kind of weird. I remember my aunt coming into my room one time and looking at my room. She saw that and she's like, "What is that?" I'm like, "It's David Lee Roth from Van Halen."
It's
This
cool.
picture on the back. This is one of my all-time favorite pictures of the band. That is so awesome. You know,
I had that poster growing up. I had that poster on my wall, and like, I'm fucking badass. Look at,
yeah, man.
Yeah.
This is just great. This is, you know, I mean, I could take any of those albums, but I think this was the one that would fit the most, give me the most listening pleasure as far as having different kind of styles of some songs on here. So I'm picking that one. That's I go from Yes to Van Halen, but I love them. I love them both. So.
Well, and that's the album that made Valerie Bertinelli fall in love with Eddie Van Halen.
Well, yeah. Who wouldn't?
Yeah. I mean, I'm in love with Eddie Van Halen after hearing that album. But yeah, and The Cradle Will Rock. I mean,
yeah.
What a great lead off track.
Let's see, what do we got here? Craig would take Honky Chateau. That would be the one he would pick, but then he laughed, so I guess he was joking.
But Honky Chateau is a great album. I mean, I think that's a decent pick.
Sam goes in the Wayback Machine. He said Buddy Holly's whole catalog was over just about 18 months. And he said, right? And so, I mean, yeah, probably so.
Yeah.
Ray, my favorite Van Halen LP after the debut. Oh, he's talking about that one. Yeah. Craig says, I would take Joe Bonamassa heading towards the daylight. Mike, have you seen Junior's grades? Ray says, I bought the debut the day it came out, just from the album cover alone. Wow, that's awesome. Craig says he would take the Association's greatest hits. Ray's talking about In a Simple Rhyme, song off of here. Vance, that's a great shot of the band. Gary, yeah, it is. Craig said he would take any Roy Gallagher album. Vinyl Sean is on here now. He says, I love the David Lee Roth era of Van Halen, but 5150 with Hagar for me is right up there. Mike, everybody wants some. Look, I'll pay you for it. What the freak? He says, what the freak? Because it's a family show here on Jeff Witcher's station. Craig would take, maybe he said, or Stevie Ray Vaughan. Now, see, Craig is picking over 10 albums, so you're kind of cheating, Craig. You got to narrow it down. You can't just say, I take this, I take that. You got to narrow it down. That's what makes it hard. I'm just kidding. But he is naming a lot of albums. So, all right, what do you got?
All right. Well, I'm going to show this out. You know, you were like, oh, people are going to take me to task for showing ABBA. And I know, you know, I think you had some apprehension showing that album because you weren't sure how people were going to react. Well, I don't expect nobody in their right mind would ever pick this album as a desert island disc. I realize I'm out on an island when I pick this album, but I'm not going to make apologies for it because, you know, when you make a list like this is my list. These are my albums. I have my reason for liking these records. And I know, I mean, I feel like up to this point, my albums have been pretty respectable. Like most people, you know, it'd be hard to argue. I think unless you're just trying to, you know, troll me or whatever. But I like, if you say, oh my God, what the fuck, Jeff? Like, I understand. Like, I get it. And I've talked about this album before, and I don't expect people to get on board with it. And I'm fine. But if I'm being honest, I want to be authentic. Like, this would be an album that I would take to a desert island with me. And I'm talking about Thomas Dolby, The Golden Age of Wireless. And I know I've been on my soapbox about this album. I'm a synth pop guy. I came out of the closet about it. Yes, I do like synth pop. I like Thomas Dolby. For me, that is one of my favorite synth pop albums, yeah, of all time. And I don't care. I think it's got great songwriting. It's everything I love about synth pop. It's not cheesy synth pop. The only song that most people recognize off it would be She Blinded Me with Science. And people consider that to be a novelty song, which I understand. I get it. You want to make fun of me. You want to come at me and say, are you out of your freaking mind? I get that. Fine. I'll take it. But I love that album. I listen to this album regularly because I like it. I love Thomas Dolby. I don't know. I've always just loved that album. And it's more than just, kind of the quirky She Blinded Me with Science. It's got some great tracks on there. If you like OMD, if you like Depeche Mode, if you like Human League, if you like Eurythmics, I think you would enjoy this album. You're not into synth pop. Yeah, you wouldn't like the album. Fine. I get it. Like, whatever. But for me, it's on my list. I'm not going to apologize for it. It is what it is. Okay. And yeah.
Well, no, that's cool. There's nothing wrong with that. I'm actually, I can't find it yet, but I will. I think when I go to Columbus next time, because I did see that record because I know you were talking about it, and so I thought, all right, I'll put that on my list to find. And I found it, but it was like a reissue, and I thought, yeah, I'm not paying that for it. So I'm still going to try to find me a used copy of it because
you should be able to find it for $7 or $8. I mean, it's not a popular album, but I'm just telling you, I bought it. When I bought it because I like She Blinded Me with Science. I thought I dug it. I thought it's cool. I just bought it for that song, and then I listened to the rest of it. I'm like, holy shit. I love this album. It's great. It's the rest of the album is not like that. I mean, it's just very much Gary Newman or, whoever well-respected artists who use, synthesizers. But, and Thomas Dolby was another artist who every album was a progression. The Flat Earth, his follow-up to that, sounds nothing like this album. Aliens Ate My Buick, in spite of the goofy title, is a progression beyond that. So with each album, I mean, he was taking it beyond kind of that, the early synth pop stylings.
Well, that video pigeonholed.
Right. I know.
MTV played it all the time. It was this goofy video. It was funny, kind of thing. And I think the fact that the video was funny, it's kind of a quirky song. So, people just dismissed him as like, oh, well, he's just this oddball, one hit kind of guy. So I think it's great.
But if there was such a thing as a synth pop masterpiece, I would submit that album would fit the bill. And I don't expect people to like it, so we can move on to your pick. But like I said, if I'm being honest, that's one that I would pick. So
that's cool. Let's catch up on a few of these.
Yeah, Vinyl Sean, OMD is top. I agree. I love OMD. They're great. Hey, Rich, nice to see you. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, Rich said he's not feeling good, so he's going to be good. So I hope you feel better soon, Rich.
Yeah, sorry to hear that.
He's probably not on here now, I'm guessing. Craig said, no, he does like Honky Chateau. He was laughing at something else, so I was wrong.
Okay.
Mike, I dig synth pop more and more all the time. I agree with that. I'm going to start looking for it tomorrow. Ray says Cars. Doo-doo. Mike's got the spin. Dig the Cars. Oh, maybe they're talking about the band. I thought he meant the song. Me too, but Jeff was talking Gary Newman. Yeah, I was right. Okay. Craig has got to run. So he says, as usual, you guys are great. And well, thank you, Craig. Thanks. Appreciate you being here and all your comments.
Yeah, thanks for dropping in.
You rock. Ray says, you don't need to apologize on your own channel, Jeff. You like what you like.
I'm a little insecure about some of my picks.
Well, there's no need to be, right? Okay, so my next pick is one of those ones like you talked about, the obvious ones, right? I've got 2 out of my last 3 are in my mind, I guess, very obvious picks. And to me, it was just a matter of which album I was going to take. And I went with Wish You Were Here by Pink Floyd, because I was trying to think which
Damn it, Gary.
Well, hey, there you go. Now we're even.
Now I'm going to have to go off camera.
That's fine. With this one, I don't know, what your reasoning was, but mine was, just kind of trying to find a representation of Pink Floyd that I don't know, because, it's got like Shine On You Crazy Diamond parts 1 through 5,000. And, so you got the long instrumental parts there that like Pink Floyd did, but it also has the shorter songs. It's got, songs that have like different meanings to them and everything. It's just a well done, well sounding, fantastic Pink Floyd album. I could have picked some of the others very easily, but I just thought this would be the one that it's a complete album and I can listen to all of it. So, ask me tomorrow, I might pick a different one. But today I went with Wish You Were Here. It's Pink Floyd is in my top 2 bands of all time. So I gotta take something by it.
Well, I'm sticking with my pick, and I'll talk about mine, since that was one of the albums that I had pulled. And I thought about Dark Side of the Moon. I love Dark Side of the Moon. I feel like Dark Side of the Moon is unquestionably, just like Pet Sounds, I feel like that's unquestionably, for me, Pink Floyd's best album. But at the same time, if I'm going on a desert island, if I'm going to be spending a lot of time in an album, I've heard Money more times than I care. It's like Stairway to Heaven for me. Money, I've heard it so many times. I've heard Time so many times. Us and Them so many. There's just so many songs on Dark Side of the Moon that have been overplayed on classic rock radio. Whereas Wish You Were Here, I feel there's more of it to discover. There's less of that oversaturation for me. I remember when I first heard Wish You Were Here, because like the first Pink Floyd album I owned was Dark Side of the Moon, and then I got The Wall, and then I got Momentary Lapse of Reason, I got Animals, and then Wish You Were Here. And like Wish You Were Here, I'm like, God, I hate this album. Like, like the first, like Shine On You Crazy Diamond, it just takes forever for it to go anywhere. And I remember like listening to this, like, what the fuck? Like, when are you going to do something? Like, this is just boring. I can't stand it. Like, what are you doing? And I was used to, Dark Side of the Moon, where it's like they're kind of shorter songs, or The Wall, they get to the point. And with Wish You Were Here, it was like, oh God, are they going to start singing soon? It just, for me, it was like, I'm like looking at my watch, like, okay, what the hell? And then I just didn't get it. I like friends of mine have said, Wish You Were Here is great. And I'm like, I don't hear it. I don't like this album. What are you talking about? And then, all of a sudden it's like, this album is great. I love it. And you have to be patient with it. And if it doesn't grab you the first time through, listen to it again. I mean, that's the thing. It takes its time. Shine On You Crazy Diamond. I love all of its parts. I love the way that it bookends the album. I think Welcome to the Machine is a great album. I don't mind the fact that Roy Harper sings Have a Cigar. I don't miss the fact that it's not Roger Waters or it's not David Gilmour. I love his vocal on that. I love kind of that whole audio verite moment where Have a Cigar segues into Wish You Were Here, where it's on the radio and then he's switching the dial and all of a sudden you hear somebody playing on the radio and then you hear and David Gilmour said, you know, he wanted it to sound like somebody, like this kid in their bedroom at home listening to the radio. They hear this song and they start playing along to it. And then you've got Wish You Were Here, and then back into Shine On You Crazy Diamond to kind of close things out. Yeah, I think I love, you know, Wish You Were Here just because it's so different. And, you know, it's not like the radio friendly albums like Dark Side of the Moon or The Wall. It's not like this progressive rock showcase like Animals is. It is what it is. I mean, and the genesis of that, Pink Floyd had to follow up Dark Side of the Moon, one of the greatest albums of all time, and they struggled with it. You know, originally it was going to be, and I don't know, maybe people already know this, but, you know, they had come up with the songs that eventually became Dogs and Sheep from the Animals album, which at the time were called Gotta Be Crazy and Raving and Drooling, which was Sheep. And it was going to be Shine On You Crazy Diamond on side one. And then it was going to be Raving and Drooling and Gotta Be Crazy on side two. And that was David Gilmour's like, fine, that's the album. And it's like, well, it just doesn't flow together right. I mean, they were playing those songs live, like on their 1974 tour. And then eventually it was like, well, it's not going to work that way. We're going to put Gotta Be Crazy and Raving and Drooling aside. And then they developed some newer songs. But, you know, and there was just the whole Wish You Were Here idea was the fact that, okay, we've achieved everything we dreamed of. We've got fame, we've got success. We're millionaires now, thanks to Dark Side of the Moon. Like, what's left to do? Once you've landed on the moon, what the fuck else are you gonna do? How can you possibly follow up an album like that? And I think they struggled. And I think, you know, Roger Waters was the only one who's kind of truly invested in the follow-up album. I think, if I'm not mistaken, like Nick Mason and maybe even Rick Wright were going through a divorce, or they were spending their money from Dark Side of the Moon, and they were just, they hadn't come up with any ideas. You know, David Gilmour was just kind of like, I'll do whatever, you know, and they just kind of jammed and did some stuff. But, you know, I think born out of that conflict was a brilliant album. And some people consider it better than Dark Side of the Moon. But
yeah, I've talked to a lot of people and that's their favorite album.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I thought about using The Wall because there's so many songs on there that I love, but I just felt, but the only thing that's missing from The Wall is, you know, a song like Shine On You Crazy Diamond, you know, that has all that instrumentation in it. You know, the Wall is a much more sparse album. I think it's brilliant, but if I'm taking something to represent Pink Floyd, that doesn't represent quite enough of Pink Floyd to me. So that's why I went with Wish You Were Here. Yeah,
well, and Roger Waters had this preoccupation with, you know, I think mental illness and insanity because of what happened with Syd Barrett. Shine On You Crazy Diamond, by the way, you know, is actually sort of like an acronym for Syd. Shine On You Crazy Diamond. But then also the fact that Syd Barrett showed up at the studio unannounced, looking very much different than how he did in the late 60s, the last time Roger Waters or David Gilmour or any of the members of the band had seen him. He showed up overweight. He was bald. This guy shows up in the studio and was like, oh, hey, you want me to play on this album? And they're like, who the hell is this? And then they realized, oh, crap, that's Syd Barrett, you know. And while they're recording a song about Syd Barrett, he just shows up. And yeah, that's kind of one of like the you know, stories about that album. Somebody mentioned in the comment section, which is how I was reminded of that. But yeah, what do we got comment wise?
So some people are talking about the fact that Pink Floyd has announced the Animals 2018 mix box set coming out in October. Now, I'm confused because this is not the one that Roger and David have been fighting about, is it?
It is.
It is. It's the same thing.
Yeah,
Okay.
the reason it was delayed, from my understanding, the reason why it was
Yeah, just because
delayed.
of the book, right? I mean, or the liner
Yeah.
note.
Yeah, I think the book gave too much credit to Roger Waters, or painted Roger Waters in too much of a flattering light. And David Gilmour was like, no, it's not going out that way. I am not going to sign off on this release until you excise that particular essay from the booklet to accompany that. You know, I mean, it's just typical. David Gilmour and Roger Waters, egos and fighting, and they can't agree on anything. And all these years later, they're still, butting heads.
Well, what I thought was funny was Roger Waters put out on his website the parts that David Gilmour disagreed with, and it was like, Jesus, is David Gilmour this petty? Because you always think of David Gilmour as the more easygoing guy, right? And Roger Waters is a control freak, and it was always kind of painted that way. And when you read that, and the fact that David Gilmour has been so, I don't know how,
it's been
just
30
crazy.
years. Get over it. I know Roger Waters, at the time, and Roger Waters will admit, yeah, I was an asshole back then. I thought I was all about Pink Floyd. It was all about me. I left the band. I didn't realize you guys were going to carry on. I mean, he did stuff back in 1987 that he probably regrets now. He did it out of spite. He didn't want to see a version of his band without him in it. And so he did stuff to try and circumvent that tour, try to undermine what they were trying to do. But I feel like, he's apologized for that. He's sorry that happened. But David Gilmour, for whatever reason, will not let it go. And I don't know, there's probably stuff behind the scenes. I don't pretend to know like all the reasons behind why that conflict continues to exist. But just for the sake of the fans, can you guys just get along? It's like when your parents divorce. It's like, come on, we're here together for this family function. Can you at least be civil? For the sake of the children, we're the children. But
we got a couple other comments. Sam is very interested in the Animals reissue. So am I. Mike, I was hooked from the first notes of Shine On. Never heard anything like it. Changed my life. Ray, because I knew it was about Syd Barrett. It mesmerized me. Mike says, 7th grade, new friends invited me up to their tree house. Shine On was on the boombox. They had a greenhouse on top of their tree house. Life was never the same again. He also said that it's his favorite Floyd. It's about money, money, money. Well, now he's commenting on what we're talking about. Yeah, it's about money for sure, but it's also about ego.
Ego and money always.
I know for for quite a while, I always just assumed that Roger Waters was the jerk, until I started getting more into Pink Floyd, and then hearing some of the stuff and hearing Roger Waters come out and say, and when they did that reunion, there, however many years ago it was, Roger Waters wanted to keep going. Mm-hmm. He wanted them to reunite. You could see on his face, he was happy to be up there with those guys. He tried to bring them all in for a hug and everything. And David Gilmour was like, nope. So I don't know.
I feel like, like you say, it used to be Roger Waters was always the villain in the Pink Floyd story. Now I feel like David Gilmour is being the villain by not inviting Roger Waters, because, that Endless River album.
Yeah, I don't.
Like, why couldn't you have just put out Roger Waters, Nick Mason, maybe, if you want to develop some music that Rick Waters had left behind from whatever, but like, nothing would make Pink Floyd fans happier than to have Roger Waters and David Gilmour back in the same room making music together. Because I think separately, they've never been as good as when they were collaborating. But
No,
you know,
even on some of their best solo stuff, it's
mhm.
never as good as what Pink Floyd was. You know, those are two guys that unfortunately need each other, but like to act like they don't. You know.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, okay, my next pick is Pretenders 2. To me, this is kind of like, when I was talking about Cheap Trick, and I don't know, I know this isn't up there with, some of the great albums or whatever, but I just always loved this album. And Chrissy Hynde's voice is fantastic. And, this is still the original band on this. And those first two albums, they never topped that. The Pretenders didn't. They made some other great albums, a lot of great songs and stuff. But those first two albums, they're just really special. They're, they have that feel. I don't know. I know you like a lot of bands from this time period that I'm maybe like slow in getting into. But to me, I guess I feel about like the Pretenders, probably like you do some of those bands, some of the British bands and stuff that you like. They're just magic. The song, it starts out with The Adulteress and Bad Boys Get Spanked, which are both rocking songs. And I mean, it's just the band at their best. I love those songs. Message of Love is a perfect rock pop song. It's great. The version of I Go to Sleep, Birds of Paradise, Talk of the Town, has that 60s vibe to it, right? It sounds like it's a mid 60s song, but it which I think a lot of that stuff from the very late 70s or early 80s that these British bands were doing, it had a 60s feel to it. And, this has like a punk kind of feel, but it has a 60s feel to it also. Waste Not, Want Not, Pack It Up, Day After Day, Jealous Dogs, God, another fantastic song, The English Roses, and Louie Louie. The picture on the back is awesome too. It's them playing live, and just gotta have it. I can only go so long before I have to listen to this album again. It's it's one of those out. We all have those albums, right? Every now and then, it's like, well, you know what? I haven't listened to that album for 4 or 5 months or whatever. I got to put it on. I got to put it on, listen to it from start to finish. And Pretenders 2 is one of those albums for me.
Yeah, well, and they had an EP that came out like between their first album and that one, which was really good too. But I mean, unfortunately, Pete Farndon and was that Honeywell Scott? Was that his name?
James Honeymoon Scott.
Honeymoon Scott. Yeah, unfortunately died within, I think, a few months of each other. Yeah. Before their next album came out. But yeah, that's a great album.
James, by the way, was a big fan of ABBA. And
really?
Yes, Chrissy Hynde said that was something he brought a pop sensibility to that band. Also, she said she learned a lot from him as far as songwriting and stuff goes, just because of his sensibilities, how he heard things and played. Because she had been with all that punk scene and stuff,
right,
over there before she was ever famous or signed. She was hanging out with all those guys and stuff, but she was also a little bit older, and so she kind of had that late 60s background and stuff in music, and James brought that to the band, so they had that kind of new wave punk, but yet they had an old style of pop and rock that the mixture was just great.
Yeah, it was great while it lasted. And obviously, Pretenders, continued on without missing a beat, but still.
And, you know, the album that they put out there a year or two ago, I can't think of the title of it now, but I think it's a great album too. It's actually really good. I'm not saying it's as good as this, but for where they are in their career, it's like a comeback album to me for the Pretenders, because the albums that they had been making were good, but they weren't necessarily solid all the way through. And I think this last one was.
Right. Brian Reynolds says, kind of like Waters and Gilmore. Could you imagine what kind of album James Hetfield and Dave Mustaine locked in a room could come up with? That would be an interesting collaboration. Yeah, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
Talk of the Town, great song. Yeah.
Yeah, you need to get that album. Yeah. And you can normally find it. It's not that expensive to find a used copy. The trick is finding one that's in good shape. So
right.
That's the main thing. Mike says he doesn't have any Pretenders. He will start looking. I'm surprised that Mike does not have anything by them. He mentions it's kind of like Styx and Dennis DeYoung. The fans want a reunion, but it's not going to happen. Yeah, I think Dennis DeYoung would like the reunion. But the other guys don't, because they have the Styx name. So
yeah,
but
don't hold your breath.
Yeah, I've seen both of them. And it's been a few years. I saw Dennis DeYoung a few years back, but I mean, really, if you're a big Styx fan, I almost feel like you have to see both of them, because when you see Styx, you miss some of it, because there's certain songs that they feel are too much. They don't want to do them, you know, like they don't like to do a lot of those ballads that Dennis had, but you know, a lot of Styx fans want to hear that stuff.
Right.
And when you see Dennis DeYoung, he'll play those and the other Styx songs. He does the same thing that they do, right? They get a guy that kind of sounds like Dennis DeYoung and whatever, and plays really good. Well, so he's got a couple guys, you know, that are like James White,
Tommy Shaw,
and Tommy Shaw, you know, and they sing and do some of those songs. And so, I mean, I feel like you're almost better off seeing Dennis DeYoung if you want to see a closer show to Styx, but they're both good. It's both good shows.
Yeah.
Ray says Chrissy Hynde recently announced that she has no plans to play any more Pretender songs live, if that's an accurate story. I haven't heard that. I don't know. That's a shame if that's true. She was just playing last year, I think. I don't know. COVID messed everything up. I know they were just doing some touring, but I would love to be able to see them one more time. Sam said, I saw that, Ray. No hits anyway. Well, now I really want to see that article, because I don't know what these guys are talking about. DJ Trish was here. Mid-70s Styx was the best. Ray says Styx, Equinox, Grand Illusion. Daddy Bog, Pretenders, check out the rehearsal video for Stop Your Sobbing by Mad Franco 008. I will have to check that out.
Is that old footage?
I don't know. Must be. I'm guessing. DJ Trish. Pieces of 8 is a great album. It is. I like those. That period of Styx.
Yeah, they were on a roll.
They were pretty solid albums. You know, it wasn't just those hits. What do you got? What's next?
All right. Well, this is one of my favorite albums of the 90s. And this is an artist who was not around for very long. Unfortunately, he passed away in 1997. However, some of my favorite vocalists were huge fans of his work, including Robert Plant and Chris Cornell. And I'm talking about Jeff Buckley and this album, Grace. This was his only studio album that was released during his lifetime. His father was Tim Buckley, who was a folk singer in the late 60s. He was actually featured in an episode of The Monkees, and went on to do some more experimental work. almost kind of like the, Ornette Coleman type jazz, weird stuff that kind of alienated his early audience. And he died of, I think it was a heroin overdose or something in the mid 70s. And his son, Jeff Buckley, I would argue was more talented than Tim Buckley. And this album came out in 1994. Jeff very tragically drowned in Memphis, Tennessee in 19. But this album is a masterpiece from start to finish. It is, again, talking about, he covers so much ground on this album. He covers a Leonard Cohen song, Hallelujah, which is the best version of that song which has ever been covered. You've got like aggressive heavy metal sounds on here. You've got art rock, alternative sounding music. But it's such an amazing album. His vocal range was incredible, just an amazing vocalist, an incredible songwriter, a huge talent that we lost way too soon. He was in the middle of recording his follow-up to this record when he died. And it's one of those stories like what could have been, what could he have done had he continued to live? But this is, for me, this is my favorite album of the 1990s. I don't care what album, or which artist, it just is. And yeah, I never get tired of hearing it. And it's one of my desert island picks.
Yeah. That doesn't.
Have you ever heard it, Gary?
I have not. And every time you talk about it, because I feel like you talk about it every third or fourth episode or something, and I'm always thinking I need to look it up, so I will. I got to look up some of that on YouTube. I just always forget, and I don't know it. The way you describe it, I would probably like it. Like when I look at the cover, it looks like an album I wouldn't like, but I've learned not to do that all the time, judge stuff like that. So, but
yeah, I mean, it's such, like I say, it's his only album. He had a live album that he did kind of like in a coffee house. It's called Live at Chennai, which he did. So that's technically, it was like an EP that came out, and his only studio album is that album. But it's an amazing album. And, I heard it after he had died. I mean, it was an album that I came to kind of late. And, it's no exaggeration to say, like, I mean, it was a life-changing event hearing that album for me, because I loved it so much. It's one of my favorite albums to this day. And yeah, Mike, it's true. It's a very sad story. He grew up with an absentee father who, was Tim Buckley, and tried to get out of his father's shadow. And, just the album is critically acclaimed. And not many people have heard it. Not enough people have heard it. I'll say that, but I love it to death.
Awesome. Great pick. I'm kind of sitting here in my head trying to guess what your last pick is going to be. And because you've already mentioned like some of the bands that I know you love. And so now I'm trying to, with you, I don't know. I'm not sure now. There's like, I feel like, well, you know what? I would have guessed the wrong Beatles album. Anyway, I thought you would have said the White Album, just being because it was a double album and everything. So, but you said you're not going to pick another Beatles one. You've already picked your Beach Boys. You've already picked the Rolling Stones. So I'm not sure where you're going to go with it. So,
well, I'm curious what your last pick is.
Mine honestly would probably be easier to guess, but because I haven't mentioned them. And so, I'm going to take Led Zeppelin, and I'm going to take Physical Graffiti. probably because it's a double studio record. So it's got plenty of songs on here for me to listen to. And it probably is my favorite Led Zeppelin record. To me, it doesn't have any bad songs. I know some people kind of shit on side 4, but I actually love side 4. Boogie with Stu, Black Country Woman, all that stuff. Sick Again. I like that. I like all that stuff.
Yeah, what's not to like about that?
I don't know, but I've heard people say that like that's the weak side of the album. I don't know. I don't feel like that's the case, but I don't know if I would pick a side that I thought was weak. I don't know. I guess I'd have to go over it again, but it's got, so, like a rocker, like In My Time of Dying, which, you described that song one time, and I love the way you talked about it, because it's true, by how they're just going crazy at the end of that song, like it's just sounds like it's ready to fall apart, then it just kind of ends, but that song just keeps building and building. Of course, it's got Kashmir on it, The Rover, just one of my favorite songs. It's got songs like Down by the Seaside, In the Light. It's just a terrific, terrific album of a band that was just hitting on all cylinders at the time. And I know some of these songs were left over from other albums that they threw on here. Obviously, like the song Houses of the Holy, right? We know that was meant for the album beforehand. But it just meshes well. I mean, it's kind of like the Stones' Tattoo You. They say a lot of that was already done beforehand, but that song meshes so well. And this, I don't think much of this was done beforehand, but some of it was. But it just makes a perfect album. I mean, there's not a whole lot of studio double record studio albums to where there's not songs on there that you're like, yeah, they could have cut, we talked about Quadrophenia, right? They could have cut that sucker in half. This one, I wouldn't cut anything off of it. It all fits. It's all great. So it's going to the island with me.
Yeah. Well, I love In the Light. I love Down by the Seaside. I love Trampled Underfoot. Kashmir, obviously, is an iconic track. I love Black Country Woman. I think it's great how it just kind of builds up. It's all acoustic. And then all of a sudden, you've got John Bonham on the kick drum that comes in. I think that's so cool. I think Boogie with Stu is great. Yeah, Boogie with Stu. Ian Stewart playing on a Led Zeppelin.
Yeah. How about that for a guest star?
Yeah, but In My Time of Dying is just an epic Led Zeppelin song.
Well, let's look at some of the guesses for your last pick. Let's see. Some people think you're going to pick Depeche Mode, LA Woman by The Doors. That might be Glass Tiger. Till Tuesday, since you just talked about him. Ray's favorite Led Zeppelin album is Houses of the Holy, Over the Hills and Far Away. That's a good one. Sam says, which beers are coming to the island with you? Oh, that's a good question. Daddy Bog, Elvis has left the island. Okay, so we're getting close to the end here. We're just waiting for Jeff to make his final pick. As far as beers, well, I'm going to want to bring Great Lakes, Edmund Fitzgerald. I could probably take all Great Lakes as far as that goes, but
yeah. No, I was for me, like, I don't know, Two Heart Ale is my go-to beer, but Depeche Mode would have been a good guess. Not Till Tuesday. I love Till Tuesday, but anyway, Elvis has left the island. Yeah, it's not going to be Elvis. So I feel like I talk about this album all the time, so it shouldn't be too much of a surprise. Doors, LA Woman was a great guess that almost made my list, but the album that is going to close out my Desert Island Discs.
Oh, okay.
Ghost in the Machine. I feel like I always talk about that album, so it's not any surprise. My favorite Police album by far, one of my favorite albums of the 1980s. I love the fact that it was such a departure for the Police from Zenyatta Mondatta, anything that had gone before. It's very dark, it's atmospheric, it's moody. They use synthesizers in a way that they never used before, in a very tasteful way, in a way that added texture. I don't mind, like, to me, up to that point, I hadn't cared for Stuart Copeland compositions all that much, or Andy Summers compositions, but I feel like finally they delivered the goods on this album. They were working great as a unit. I think it was recorded at Montserrat, Spain. And I just love so much about it. Invisible Sun is a great track. Every little thing she does is magic, is great. Spirits in the Material World. I don't think any of those have been too overplayed. I love side 2. I think side 2 is a fantastic side of the album. And it's just me. I mean, I understand if people prefer a different Police studio album, or you don't care for it. But for me, I love it because it's so different from any of their other albums. Synchronicity has got some elements of it. I think, like, Oh My God would have fit well on the Ghost in the Machine. But yeah, I love that album for reasons I can't entirely articulate, but I just do.
Well,
So
it's
there you have it.
it's got a different sound too.
Mhm.
It's just, I mean, I mean the sound of the actual record, not just the compositions, but they are too. But when I think of, Spirits in the Material World, that just has such a unique sound to it. We are spirits. The drum, the snare, the drums on that album. Stuart Copeland, man, he did not sound like anybody
Right.
in rock drumming, because he's not really a rock drummer per se. It's kind of like Charlie Watts playing with the Stones. Different kind of vibe, and it works great. That album, yeah, that's my favorite Police album too.
Yeah, because you got elements that you never heard before. I mean, think about the 2 tracks that open up the tracks that open up side A, which is Spirits in the Material World. You've got that synthesizer. Like, whoa, where did that come from? It's entirely keyboard rhythm. And then Too Much Information on side B, which you've got the horns. Like, where did the horns come from? And it's not like horns like Chicago or Blood,
Right.
Sweat, and Tears. It's just like, I mean, it's like so perfect. And then right into Rehumanize Yourself, and then One World Not Three, which is a great example of Stuart Copeland drumming. It's just all the way through. You got Demolition Man, which is a great bass groove kind of track. Hungry for You, the track before that, which has French lyrics, but still not a weak track on that album. I love it from start to finish.
Yeah, and the song Invisible Sun is, to me, that's a highlight of, as far as like top songs by the band, that's right up there. I love that song. And I mean, I love Regatta de Blanca an awful lot. I guess that's my second favorite Police album. And I used to think it was my favorite, but it's not. It's Ghost in the Machine. And what's so weird, you talk about how you can't really articulate it. And I agree on that album, because there's so many things about that album. I swear that I almost feel like I shouldn't like it. I feel like when other bands have attempted to sound kind of like that, I don't like it. But somehow when those 3 guys come together and the things that they did on that album, like you said, you talk about the horns on that. Like, there's a lot of bands when I hear horns, I'm like, God, I hate it. But on there, somehow the way they did it, it was different. The synthesizers that they used were different. They just did a fantastic job. Yeah, that album is that's one of the highlights of the 80s is Ghost in the Machine. If anybody out there does not have that album, you need to pick that one up. That's a great
one. Interesting. One of the tracks that did not make the album that was recorded during that time is darker than anything that actually made Ghost in the Machine. It's a B-side. I think it might have been the B-side to Synchronicity too. They stuck it on the B-side, but it's a song called Once Upon a Daydream. And it's got all the elements of, that you find on Ghost in the Machine, kind of the creepy synthesizers. You got a bit of horns in there. But it is talking about this guy. He's in a relationship with this girl, and her dad doesn't want them to be together. And so he goes and he blows her dad's brains out. And now, like, he's on the run from the police, the real police, but it's just like such a dark song. And it's just the fact, like, we just wanted to be together. Her dad interfered, so I had to kill her dad, and now, like, I'm in jail. It's just like such a dark song, and that almost made Ghost in the Machine, but I think it was a little too dark even for that album,
even for their dark album.
Yeah.
Well, that's a great pick, Jeff. You know that I love that album. So I guess before we shoot out here, let's what do we got here? Ray bought that album the day it came out. So wow. He got a few of them way back. Mike thinks it's a great pick. DJ Trish thinks it's a great pick. Sam St. John said happy 50th to the School's Out album. God, that's crazy.
Oh wow. Has that got an anniversary?
I don't know. I wonder if they re-released anything. I don't know. Ray says that Neil Peart and Stuart Copeland are his two favorite drummers. Yeah, they're both in my top 5. I think I did a top 5 drummers once. Mike's got to spin. Great drummer. Even Neil Peart studied Stuart's style. Oh yeah. Stuart definitely had an influence on Neil Peart. All you got to do is start listening to Permanent Waves on for the next few albums, and you can hear some of Stuart Copeland in there, especially on the Moving Pictures album.
Yeah, what almost made my list too was Permanent Waves by Rush. That was like another one of those that was real close.
That's this list. Daddy Bog says Motown, doo-wop, and instrumental albums left for the Coast Guard. Ray, huge fan of the Alice Cooper group when they were a band. Yeah, me too, but I actually love all eras of Alice Cooper. The early stuff's the best, but he's done so many great albums. Mike's got to spin. It's hard to fit everything into 10 picks. Yes, it is. Mm-hmm. I'm sure they will tell you these picks could change from week to week. Yes. Brian, really appreciate you guys doing these live chats on Thursdays. I look forward to it each week. Well, we look forward to you, Brian, and making comments.
Right.
Ray, my picks changed as we were on here. Totally different 10 already. Yeah, I could have changed mine. That's why I had no problem with the duplicate. I'm like, that's all right. That just gives me a chance to throw something else on there. So, yeah, this was cool. Hard to do, but fun. It's always fun talking about albums that you love. And obviously, any album you're going to take to a desert island with you are albums that you love. So, this is great. I had a great time hearing everybody else's picks too. And their comment. It's a pretty good group tonight.
Yeah, well, I feel like Desert Island Picks is kind of a dated concept considering we're in the age of Spotify and streaming music. But, if you were let's say you were going to an island where there was no Wi-Fi or anything and you only had like a physical copy of a record, that's kind of, the idea.
Well, yeah, it's just the basic concept. What's 10 albums that you feel you're not going to get tired of? That you would, if you didn't have them with you, you'd be like, oh shit, I want that album with me, right? So that's kind of what it is. So
right,
it is great. It's it's not too hard to think of 10 albums. It's just hard to narrow it down.
Mm-hmm. Agreed.
All right.
Well, thank you, Gary. Thank you for joining us. Hopefully we'll have the gang back with us next week. It's summer, so people are busy.
Yeah.
You know,
Normally I don't have
Unbelie-
much of a life, so
yeah, me either.
I might
So
I might not be here next Thursday though, now that I say it, because I don't want people to get tired of me. So, I might just skip for that reason.
well, if I have to carry the show alone, Gary, I'm more than qualified to do that.
You were doing it before I even get on here, buddy.
Yeah. But I do want to genuinely, sincerely thank everybody who tuned in to our live chat tonight. I appreciate it. I appreciate all the comments. Hopefully we got to everybody. We covered everybody's comments during our chat. Yeah, tune in next week. We'll have a different topic. If you have any suggestions, if you want to leave them in the comment section of this video, we will be happy to oblige. Most definitely. So,
Thanks,
all
everybody.
right. Thank you, everybody. All right. Have a great week and weekend. Happy
Happy
4th of
4th.
July weekend.
Yes.
Yeah.